Marjorie Aron-Sapphire, founder and artistic director of the Arts Arena. The Arts Arena is a nonprofit, multidisciplinary initiative in the arts, the visual arts, the performing arts, meaning theater, music, dance, film, and very importantly for me, a forum for culture and society, where we deal with arts that are dealing with social issues. The name is a kind of bringing together as opposed to a silo or an exclusivity. An arena is where you have events, but they can be all sorts of different events. Yes, they can be gladiator events, but we did not focus on that. And the idea, the vision I had in my mind was sort of a 5-ring circus, where you had dance going on here, music going on here, visual art here, film festivals here, and all under the same tent. And so that was the image I had, but I thought it wasn't quite elegant enough to call it the art circus. So Arena did the thing, and I think it's also important to remember that in 2007, this was much more uncommon than it is today. In 2007, museums showed paintings or sculpture. Dance performances just showed the dance performance. Today you have museums bringing in performance. You have performance art bringing in musicians or visual artists. That was not the case when I founded the Arts Arena. So it was a much more, if I can put it this way, original vision than it would be considered if you're just coming in today. We've now put on over 300 important cultural events, sometimes dealing with dance, sometimes dealing with the environment, sometimes dealing with water shortages, concerts, music, etc., visual artists. We have people like in theater, Robert Wilson, Isabelle Huppert, French actress Juliette Binoche, another French actress, Willem Dafoe, an American actor, Mikhail Baryshnikov, the famous dancer, Lucinda Childs, the dancer choreographer, William Christie, the founder of Les Arts Florissants, the Baroque Ensemble, James Conlon, who was director of the Paris Opera, the musical director, and now is musical director of the LA Opera. So these are major figures in the arts. And what makes the Arts Arena unique is that all of our events are free and open to the public. You can imagine with events being free, the Arts Arena has the most diverse audience imaginable. I like to say that we could have a person who could literally buy the Paris Opera sitting next to a person who can't buy a ticket to the Paris Opera. And they each have the same access to, let's say, Willem Dafoe or Baryshnikov when they come to an Arts Arena event. I absolutely wanted to give the broadest audience possible, without consideration of their financial resources, exposure to the finest in culture, because I believe that somebody who has not read a book is not the same as somebody who's read a book. And I also believe that the arts are where people come together. Your country can be at war with another country, and you can be sitting next to someone from that other country in a concert. But you're not reacting as enemies. You're both there concentrated on the common experience of the music that takes you elsewhere. So I think the arts have an extraordinarily important role to play, and that was the idea with the Arts Arena, that we would be multidisciplinary, that we would break down silos, not just among the different artistic disciplines, but also between the world of the arts and the worlds of business, economics, sciences, sustainable development, cultural diplomacy. I like sort of the meeting of extremes between knowledge and imagination.
I experimented every day with anything that moved?
I began to sculpt in a studio of an old sculptor and do whatever I want. And he occasionally came by and taught me things.
Just was like a fevered dream. I mean, I didn't really care what people thought or how what the road was. I just knew that I had to take it.
People don't go to the arts arena just for an evening out. One thing I absolutely insisted on from the beginning was that after every event, whether it's a lecture, whether it's a conversation, whether it's a performance, we have a reception. And that sounds sort of crazy for an organization that does not charge for its events. But the idea was that people with similar interests could meet each other, could mingle, could meet the artist and ask questions one-on-one of the artist. Being an academic, I wanted to communicate to people, this is not an academic event like the others. This is something different. And part of our identity was I insisted no peanuts, no potato chips, no plastic cups. And it wasn't even for environmental reasons. I've never liked to drink out of plastic cups. And I wasn't going to give, as sort of the hostess, I wasn't going to give my guests something that I didn't like. And I also believe that every single thing you do reflects on the organization and is part of its identity. From the very first, we invested in graphic design. We established a visual identity because for me, whatever we did, this is representing the arts arena. And so for me, plastic cups and peanuts were not the arts arena. And in fact, it's been unwittingly one of our most important recruitment tools. I've met people at our receptions who later became guests at the arts arena. They were famous artists, and I met them at our own receptions. Or some people would meet people they found interesting. They would see our very eclectic program for the semester and say, oh, that looks interesting. I think I'll come back. So the arts arena is different. As I like to say, we have to be different because we did not start out with funding or staff. We made chicken soup without a chicken. I do not recommend the recipe. You do it because you have no other choice. When I would go in and meet somebody, our invitations were like a calling card. They not only showed who had been at the arts arena, but they communicated the quality of the arts arena by the paper, by the quality of the design. They're minimalist from an aesthetic point of view, but not from a content point of view. I always write a text telling who the person is and very often why we're talking to that person at that particular time. For example, Jennifer Tipton, with whom I just did a conversation, is called by Politico the queen of theater lighting. She's done just about every dance, theater, opera performance imaginable in every major house. She has so many Tonys and Bessies and Drama Critic Awards. I could have spent the entire evening just reading them. She's 84 years old now, and she was in Paris to do the lighting for the Paris Opera Ballet's production of Balanchine's A Midsummer Night's Dream. So it's tied into a current event, but also her history, she was a MacArthur Fellow as well, is put in there so even people who have never heard her name understand who she is, and that sort of creates, we hope, an interest in turning out to hear the person. But when I could go in blindly to an appointment with somebody I didn't know that I wanted to ask something of, these invitations, as I said, were like a calling card. This is who we are, this is what we do. And I think almost always people commented on the quality of the invitations. We made the decision to invest in programming rather than in bricks and mortar, and to steal from Hemingway. We're somewhat of a movable feast. We have events in all sorts of different venues here at the Hôtel de Talleyrand, on Paris's famous Place de la Concorde, a building that was the in-town townhouse of Foreign Minister Talleyrand, that was then a Rothschild mansion, and was then bought by the United States government, and it was actually used as the administrative center of the Marshall Plan after World War II. And as you can see, it's a gorgeous building and was restored by the World Monument Fund. And thanks to the embassy, we have the privilege of giving concerts very frequently on these premises, which also have great acoustics. And other times we've done events at public theaters, we've done things at Columbia University's global centers, at Reed Hall on the left bank, we've done events in funky lofts, we've done things at the Golden Gallery, La Galerie Dorée of the Bank of France. So it is sort of a movable feast, and I'm happy to say that we have been able to operate in such a way that these venues are given to us free of charge because the people involved like the content that we bring to these venues. It is my great pleasure to present to you conductor David Stern, Alexander Neff, the extraordinary dancer Friedman Vogel, Laurent Lebon, Michel Gondry, Jennifer Tipton, Keiji Kagami, followed by Boomerang, Rufus Wainwright, Lucinda Childs, the film, and then Lucinda Childs present in person. My friend, James Conlon, Robert Wilson, Isabelle Huppert. In the word barter is the word art. And I really think it's an art that we've been good at. We've been able to say to someone, for example, well, Robert Wilson is coming to do a conversation with me at the Arts Arena, and we're looking for a place. And say, oh, Robert Wilson, oh, we'd love to have Robert Wilson. And so we're bringing them someone that they could not get on their own. This is just an example. March 29th, we had a big event with the singer, songwriter, composer Rufus Wainwright. And 4 days later, we had a big event with the musical director of the LA Opera, James Conlon. The events were extremely different, and the venues were extremely different. For Rufus, we had the most fun. We were given the Rex Club, which is the nightclub attached to the Grand Rex Theater, which is an amazing theater that was designed by the same person who did Radio City Music Hall. And so for the first time, we were actually in a nightclub doing our conversation. And then for James Conlon, we were in the stately rooms where we are now in the Hôtel de Talleyrand. They're venues that we use because they have the facilities that we need. For example, if we're giving a concert, the acoustics have to be good. So we use whenever we can the Galerie Dorée, the Golden Gallery of the Banque de France, because it's certainly one of the most spectacular rooms in France, and the acoustics are extraordinary. Or if we're doing a dance performance, it has to be a theater that has a dance floor. But when it's just for a conversation that I do with some artist, it can be anything. There are times when we have used movie theaters because we do several movie festivals, and we have our own film festival, which is done at the Cinémathèque Française, which is the French National Cinema Institute. So it depends really on the needs of the event. So the event comes first, and then we look for the venue. One of the things that the Arts Arena has developed, and that I feel really most gratified about, is we have a very loyal audience. And landscape architect Thomas Waltz once spoke at the Arts Arena, and he said, nobody's gonna come. They don't know my work. I've done in New Zealand, I've done at Hudson Yards in New York, etc. He said he was amazed that there was a full house, standing room only, and then this reception afterwards. We got to talk to all these people. And he said, what I came to understand is the arts arena's power to convene, which I thought was very interesting. And then he added, and it's because the audience comes for any and every event because they totally trust the curation. They know that if it's an arts arena event, it's going to be high quality. So our sole criterion from the very start was excellence, not nationality. And that's been it all the way through. And I think that what established our reputation, people in the beginning, I think, tended to think, oh, it's an American center. But they quickly learned because we had artists from different nationalities. I mean, we've had people from India, we've had people from Russia, we've had people from Germany, we've had people from all over. What counts for us is the excellence. It is the only criterion. We have remarkable people on our Arts Advisory Council. They're in all the different fields of the arts. We didn't have the reputation, but they did. And so you find out in looking back that you actually know people that you never realized you know, because I didn't go around collecting people. And it was only when I was thinking about who could be on this council that I realized that I actually knew some people. And of course, what happens is you build a critical mass. When you can go to Lucinda Childs, for example, and say, well, Robert Storr and Sean Kelly and Robert Wilson are on our Arts Advisory Council. Would you be? And in each case, I assured them, this is not fundraising, and I'm not going to ask you to fundraise. All I want to be able to do is to turn to you when I need to. That's how it sort of builds up, in the same way that it's much easier to get someone to perform free of charge at the Arts Arena, because we now have a list of things that we've done, and people want to be part of that list. People come to us now and say, I'm going to be in Paris, I'd love to do an Arts Arena event. So we've been able to exist because the artists donate their time. And one of the things that really makes me the happiest is 9 times or 9.5 times out of 10, they come back, and they keep coming back. Like Robert Wilson has spoken maybe 8 or 9 times at the Arts Arena, Robert Storr probably 12 times, Lucinda Childs 5 or 6 times, Rufus Wainwright 4 times. So they're getting something from the experience, and that makes me very happy. The people at the top of their field are often the most generous and the most willing to give of their time. And the Arts Arena literally could not have existed for these 15 years had it not been for the generosity of the artists. We could never pay these people. And the fact that they were willing to take a chance on us, and as I said, then come back for more, which is really gratifying, is important. And if people thank us for the Arts Arena, we as the Arts Arena have to thank the artists, obviously donors, obviously our membership, but the artists above all, because without them, we would not exist. From what I understand, you were raised in a rather bourgeois environment. Where does your sense of the absurd come from? Even more times than you've been a pianist, you've been a hooker. Do you consider that artists have a duty to use their platforms and outreach to a large public to take public stands?
Ooh, that's a very good question.
I don't consider myself fearless. I'm pretty much afraid of everything. That doesn't keep me from doing it. I refuse to be a prisoner of fear. So I can be afraid of a lot of things. Certainly the first time I got up and did a public conversation, which was with William Christie, the conductor and founder of Les Arts Florissants, I was terrified, but I did it. And then it went well, so that made it easier to do the next conversation. That's where the passion comes back in too. I mean, I don't ask questions the way a journalist would, who would maybe be less interested, and I don't ask questions the way a specialist would, or I contextualize the questions. If there's something that I think the audience doesn't know, I try and ask it in such a way that they see what it is before I actually ask the question. I had the experience with some of your films. I don't know if other people have had the same experience, that I would watch the film and be laughing during the film, and when the film was finished, I was very sad. A kind of melancholy came in, and I asked myself, why? Here I'm laughing at this film. Why did I feel melancholy afterwards? And one of the things I thought about was that it was a little bit like when you wake up from a dream, that there's a world that you get a glimpse of that you can't go back to.
Yeah.
Does that...
It happens to me all the time. And when I get up, I fall back asleep to continue the dream, and then I go open one eye and then I close it back, and I can come back like 2 or 3 times in the same dream.
I mean, this sounds funny for me to say. I've received, to my great surprise, because I was hesitant to get into this role with William Christie in the beginning, I mentioned my fear. I've really received tremendous feedback on the conversations from both the artists and the audience. So I think that some balance might be there, but I do think that it's as much because I'm not stupid, but I'm not a specialist, and I think that helps a lot. You're not Jewish, you're not Romanian, you're not French. Why Paul Celan? What's the difference for you, or is there one, between dancing a narrative ballet and a non-narrative ballet? Don't forget, I had a day job when I started the Arts Arena. I was a full professor. So the worst that could happen was that this didn't take off, and it failed. I still had, my professional reputation was not with the Arts Arena. It was as a professor of comparative literature. So in that sense, I was operating from a position of security. In fact, as it turned out, I left being a professor of comparative literature in 2013 in order to devote myself full-time to the Arts Arena, because it had taken off to such an extent that I couldn't do both. And at that point, I felt that I had written enough books, enough articles, I had created enough courses, and I was ready to have fun. We had the French filmmaker Michel Gondry, and the audience was in place, and they were really excited because he has like a big following and everything, and I was to do a conversation with him. So I had all my questions and done all my research, et cetera, and we wait, and we wait, and we wait, and he doesn't show up. We had showed the film that he did with Noam Chomsky. And afterwards, I stood up there and I explained that Michel Gondry was missing in action, and that I was going to carry on the interview and the conversation giving the answers myself, and that we would invite him back another time to have him give his answers to the question. And that's what I did. I interviewed myself as Michel Gondry, and we did have him back at another time. We did find him, and it all worked out very well. Another example was we were supposed to do a dance performance with people who had come from the States for it, that required an extraordinarily deep stage, something that only national theaters have here. And we had a professional fashion photography studio that had the kind of space, and we'd worked with them before, and so they were going to let us use it for that. And like a day, maybe 2 days before, the owner of the space calls me and he says, "We've been closed down. Some government regulation. So I'm sitting there, what am I going to do? I have like 8 dancers who have come from the States, and I have, all dressed up with no place to go. Finally, we were offered the dance studio of Théâtre du Châtelet, which is one of the major national theaters here. And it turned out to be fabulous because it was so funky and so offbeat. Everybody had to be accompanied by the firemen down into the studio. The performance went on, and then we went out to their reception hall, which is gilded along this line, and had our reception there, overlooking the Seine with the conciergerie in the background. And it was fine. I think it's a miracle that we have done what we've done and that we exist 15 years out, having done an average of 20 events per year. So in some ways, my answer to the future is what Napoleon's mother said when she was congratulated on her son's achievements, and she said, pourvu que ça dure. Let's hope it continues. So I'm really, really pleased to be able to say 15 and still going. I would like us to go towards younger, emerging artists, a new generation of stellar artists that are as good quality-wise as the artists that we've been able to show thus far. And the same is for an audience. And I think that any arts institution would answer the same thing. We have to attract the next generation of audience. Bringing in younger artists that we present brings in a younger audience, which is really important. I function, I hope, like a good hostess, in that I feel that these people are coming to see something that I'm putting on. And I want them to be comfortable. I want them to think it's absolutely fantastic. And I want them to afterwards talk to other people and exchange about it and come back for the next thing.
There's something which comes out of you, which I didn't know of myself.
Music was our religion.
In theater is true composition. And as Marjorie has said, I feel that it is composition in space and time.
I had a tonette shoved into my mouth when I was 10.
It's full of every energy, speed imaginable, and it will be changing constantly every second.
I believe in thinking and reflecting time. I believe in looking out the window. And people used to think on the bus, now they're on their cell phones. And I think that, again, when I say somebody who's read a book is different from somebody who's not read a book, there's a kind of opening of horizons that you start thinking more freely and more creatively, and you're not just locked in to what people told you or what a textbook has told you. And I think that art does all those things. I mean, if you look at a painting, it's not telling you, you have to see this in such and such a way. An opera or a concert, they're not telling you how to hear it. They're offering something to you, and you can let your mind wander. You're not thinking about paying the electricity bill, hopefully. You're in a different space, and I think that for our humanity, for our living together, for our survival on the planet, and as a civil society, we need room to be in a different place in terms of our thoughts. And I think that art is one of the rare creatures, if I can put it that way, that opens that door.